The news of the pregnancy was unexpected. It can't be. Kate didn't believe, looking at the test. She was with Vince only once, and then he left. They immediately decided that only this night would be between them. And now, this pregnancy. The girl cried over the test and didn't know what to do next. She was graduating from college with wonderful prospects. Practice in the best place that others could only dream of. But this practice will not happen if she has to sit with the child. Her temples throbbed. Her head began to hurt. Kate waited for her mother to return home and told her everything. "My daughter, don't think about abortion. I'll help you raise your child. I'll have a granddaughter. Don't give up on her. It's a gift from God." Kate didn't know what to do. She didn't want and didn't expect this child. She felt sick at the mere thought that she would have to give birth out of wedlock. And the thought of giving up her career and becoming a stay-at-home mom was completely unbearable for her. Vince immediately cut off all contact. Of course, the opportunity to go to his firm was to let him know that he would have a child. But Kate promised she would not appear in his life again. She didn't want to fall in love with him even more and be left without the career she had dreamed of since leaving school. The girl still decided not to have an abortion, succumbing to the persuasion of her mother. She began to regret it at a later date when she could no longer have an abortion. She cried into her pillow and cursed fate for such an ordeal and asked God to give her strength. The son was born healthy. Kate's mother was not very happy with her grandson because she expected that a girl would be born. Even the ultrasound erroneously showed that Kate was expecting a girl, but a boy was born. All his indicators were excellent, and the child developed as needed. But he didn't receive maternal love and care because Kate immediately went to work and began to build her career. Grandmother took care of her grandson as best as she could. Shane was a quiet and calm boy, so he didn't cause any problems for his family. When her son was 6 years old, Kate often went on business trips. When she was in one of them, she received terrible news from her mother. "Kate, we have a grief. Shane climbed with the guys on the garages and fell off the roof. There's something wrong with his spine." Kate thought about it, and her heart didn't even skip a beat. But any mother would already rush to her son to support him and help him. But the woman felt nothing. She also didn't fly home the next day because she had to complete all the business on a business trip. Kate returned home only on the 5th day. She entered the hospital room where her mother was sitting next to an emaciated and exhausted boy. "Mommy." Shane smiled and tried to sit up, but couldn't. He writhed in pain and pulled his arms to his mother, but she did not come to him, standing in the doorway and looking at him. The boy continued to say, "I'm sorry. I love you." The boy's eyes filled with tears, but even this didn't touch the cold heart of his mother. Kate pursed her lips as she walked out into the hallway with her mother. Everything was clear without diagnosis and conclusions from doctors. Grandma said, "He won't be able to walk anymore. Now, he will need such care that you will have to choose between him and your work." Kate lowered her head. Her answer was more than obvious. "Daughter, give him to an orphanage for the disabled. Why do you need such a burden? Let him live there, and you will marry and bear children for yourself." The next day, Kate wrote in the hospital the rejection of the child under the reproachful glances of the head of the department and the nurse, and left all his documents. She was warned that she could be called to the guardship authorities, but she said that she was flying away on another business trip and she didn't have time to talk. Kate said in disgust, "Do whatever you want with him. I don't need a burden. I'm still too young and beautiful to waste my life on diapers and caring for him." At that moment, the woman's heart clenched in her chest, but only for a second. The woman understood that she was abandoning her own child, her own son. She will never see him again. When she passed the hospital room, she didn't even look in, even though she heard her son crying, who was informed by the nurse that his mother would not come anymore. She probably did it on purpose to put pressure on Pity. But Kate overcame all feelings inside and turned off all her emotions. "Mommy, forgive me. Don't leave me, Mommy. Mommy, I can walk." The scream quickly faded into consciousness as soon as Kate stepped outside. In the orphanage for the disabled, Shane couldn't open up to anyone for a long time. The caregivers tried to befriend him, but he would not talk to them. When he was allowed to sit down, he spent most of the time sitting on the bed and looking out the window in the hope that his mother or grandmother would take him away from there. The boy sincerely believed that his family needed him, and that they decided to leave him in the hospital for a while until he fully recovered. But months passed, and his back didn't want to fully recover, and his mother and grandmother didn't want to take him home. Tears streamed down the boy's cheeks every night. He cried and asked God to return his mother to him, and that she would take him home. One day, this orphanage for the disabled got into a program of help from a wonderful massage therapist who dealt with similar problems. Even seriously ill patients were recovering thanks to his golden hands. And from time to time, he did charity work, doing free massage therapy courses. Shane was lucky to be one of those chosen by the doctor. The boy did everything he was told. He carried out every recommendation, and the treatment began to bear fruit. Sometimes, they say that there is no chance, but the most important thing is willpower and a person's desire for change. Shane was small, but he understood everything and did exactly as he was told, so that one day he could get on his feet, run to his mother, and say that he was already cured, and now they could live together again. 16 years have passed. Shane got to his feet anyway. But by this time, he had already realized that his mother didn't need him on his feet either. The guy successfully graduated from college, completed an internship, and received a job offer from a good company. The guy spent most of the night preparing for the interview, so he didn't get enough sleep, but he managed to pull himself together. The female secretary said, "The boss is already waiting for you." Shane took a deep breath, knocked on the door, and entered the office. A man in an expensive suit sitting in the boss's chair said, "Good morning." His gaze was suddenly familiar for a moment, as if Shane had met him before when he was still young. Shane smiled. "Good morning. Here is my CV and mock-ups of the work I have designed for the portfolio and in practice." The guy put a folder with documents in front of the boss. The man added, looking at Shane's CV, "Shane, have a seat." The guy thanked him for the offer and sat down. The door to the office opened, and Shane turned towards the sound. His gaze fell on the woman, from whose hands all the papers fell in the same second. She looked at the guy for a few seconds with a dumbfounded look, her mouth slightly open. He would recognize that face even if he were blind. He will never forget the icy look coming from the stone heart. The guy pretended he didn't recognize the woman, but he got to his feet, walked over to her, and began to help her pick up the papers from the floor, either out of politeness or to show her that he was no longer a helpless invalid. His mother also pretended not to recognize her son. Her trembling fingers betrayed the fact that this was not so. He himself decided not to say anything yet. He returned to his seat and settled comfortably in his chair. The boss asked, "Kate, are you all right?" He spoke with such warmth in his voice that it was immediately clear to Shane that they were in a serious relationship. Shane was afraid that now his mother would convince the boss not to hire him. It's unlikely that she will remember the maternal instinct, which has never visited her in these 16 years. She answered the boss, "Yes, it's okay." The boss began to ask questions, and Shane answered them firmly and confidently. "I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Mr. Roberts. Shane, Tell us more about yourself and your life. In our company, the relationship is almost like a family, so I would like to know a little more about the life of my employees. Of course, if you think it's too personal information, you don't have to tell me. Shane wondered, does that mean I'm hired? His palms were wet with excitement. Kate was silent all this time, studying the documents. Apparently, she too was supposed to conduct this interview. The boss nodded to Shane. You've been hired. Tell us about yourself. I don't have the most pleasant story, but if you insist. The chief nodded. If you don't mind, then I would insist. Life is not a fairy tale, and it has battered all of us. Then listen to me. I never knew my father, and my mother didn't need me. I still don't know why she gave birth to me. When I was 6 years old, I fell off the roof of a garage. I remember that my grandmother was then talking to a female neighbor and asked not to distract her, and the older boys called me. I became interested. They climbed onto the roof first, but the roof was slippery and I fell off the roof. I injured my spine. I was told that I would always lie down and not be able to stand up. My mother didn't come to see me for a very long time. I thought she was angry, and I dreamed of hugging and kissing her and asking for forgiveness. And when she arrived, she didn't even come up to me. Then the nurse told me that my mother would never come to me again. She doesn't like a son who can't walk. I screamed very loudly. I cried and asked her to forgive me. I swore I wouldn't do that again. But she didn't come back. And then a real magician appeared. I'm lucky he chose me. He did massages and recommended exercises for me. I did everything as he told me to get back on my feet and become needed again by my beloved mother. But when everything worked out for me, I realized that she didn't need me, and I decided to move on with my life. I studied hard and strived to become a competent specialist, and then I got a job offer from your company. That's how I ended up here. Shane gritted his teeth as if it hurt him to remember the moment his mother left him. He looked up and noticed Mr. Roberts' eyes were filled with tears. Mr. Robert wiped away a tear and shook his head, and Kate broke the pen she was holding. Kate didn't say that this woman is now sitting in the office, and Kate apologized and left the office. Shane talked a little more with the boss and promised that he would start work tomorrow morning. He said goodbye to the man, thanked him for the conversation, and left the office with a smile on his face. He was hired. On the street outside the office, Shane ran into his mother. He stopped beside her and looked at her. The guy asked her, "Mom, did you recognize me?" And the woman began to shake her head. "I beg you, don't say anything to Mr. Roberts. My relationship with him just started to get better. I can't lose the job I've longed for because of the mistakes of my past." Shane asked without taking his eyes off the woman, "So, you admit it was a mistake?" "I admit it, but I don't regret anything. If I had left you at home with me then, you would never have learned to walk again, and I wouldn't be able to do anything. Therefore, you should thank me. Above all, don't say anything to Mr. Roberts." Shane was disgusted. He shook his head and walked to his car. Shane had been working at Mr. Roberts' company for 2 weeks now, crossing paths with his mother from time to time. The woman didn't create any problems. She treated Shane like any employee, but more often than not, she avoided meeting him. One day, he saw an elderly woman near the office and immediately recognized her. It was his grandmother. She stood, crushing the handles of the bag with her fingers, and looked expectantly at the doors. And when she saw the guy, she began to cry. She asked, approaching the guy, "Shane, can I talk to you?" "Yes, you certainly may." "Hello, let's take a walk. I can suggest you go to a cafe." When Shane drove with his grandmother to the nearest cafe, he realized that he had long ago let go of his grudge against his mother and grandmother, who had abandoned him. He didn't wish them harm and didn't want to take revenge on them. As it happened, so it happened. Nothing can be returned. His grandmother sighed heavily. "It's all my fault. I was afraid that I wouldn't be able to raise you." I knew Kate didn't need you. I persuaded her not to have an abortion, and then I started to get sick. I thought it was a girl, and a boy was born. That is, you. And when it all happened, I understood that Kate didn't need you. She didn't come the first day. And I was weak and couldn't cope with a disabled person. Forgive me if only I knew. You don't need to apologize. What was is gone. Shane, don't ruin Kate's life. She gave everything for her career. She sacrificed women's happiness. Don't tell your father the truth about her being your mother. Shane seemed to have been hit on the head at that second. He became catastrophically short of air. He realized that his mother didn't want to make up with him and get his forgiveness. She came to pray for his mother. And the father? What father was she talking about? Did his father work for the company? If Kate had not broken up with Christopher then, maybe everything would have turned out differently. Maybe you would have a family. And Christopher didn't try to find out how Kate's life turned out. If he had found out earlier, if he had known that he had a son. I beg you, don't ruin her career because there is nothing to return. His forehead was covered with sweat. Shane felt himself begin to shake. Mr. Roberts was his father. That's where he saw that look. He looked in the mirror every day, but didn't even guess that he looked so much like Mr. Roberts. And now, this similarity didn't go out of his head. His boss is his father. I heard you. Thanks for talking, but I think our conversation is over. Mr. Roberts will know for himself if he needs anything. Then Shane got to his feet, put the money for their ordered tea on the table, and hurried to leave. He was offended that his grandmother found him, only to ask him not to tell anything to his father. And now, it was clear to him why his mother was so frightened. His father didn't know anything about the fact that he had a son. Another 2 weeks have passed. Shane didn't know if he needed to share the truth with Mr. Roberts. After all, this news will be a severe blow to him. They sat in the boss's office and discussed one of the projects. Suddenly, Mr. Roberts patted Shane on his shoulder and said admiringly, "You are like a son to me. You understand me from half a word. You'll feel what I want to see, as if you read my thoughts. Perhaps God sent you to me for a reason." Shane said unwillingly, "Father, you have no idea how close to the truth you are." The words just fell off his tongue. Mr. Roberts opened his eyes wide in surprise, and then he laughed softly. "Funny, you're good with humor. I'm glad that we have established such a warm relationship." Shane didn't say another word. He regretted that he had told the truth. After all, he had no evidence of kinship with this man. And he didn't know if there was any point in trying to mend the relationship now. He didn't want to betray his mother. After all, everyone once receives his punishment from heaven. A month passed, which brought with it an unexpected stab in the back. Shane was framed. He had no doubt that his mother had done it. But why did she need it? Why did she do this? He didn't tell anyone about their relationship. Perhaps she was afraid that one day Mr. Roberts would notice the resemblance to his son and get to the truth. On that ill-fated day, Mr. Roberts chastised Shane in front of everyone. "I didn't think you would tell our competitors about our developments. I trusted you like a son. And you..." Shane sounded desperate. "I didn't do anything like that. Go away, and I don't want to see you ever again. You also tell me that my wife did it. No one saw them except you, me, and her." Shane knew it was useless to justify himself. Nobody believed him. He didn't have any proof. And he silently left, gathering his things. 2 weeks later, Mr. Roberts arrived home early from work. He quietly entered the house and heard his wife talking on the phone. "Mom, yesterday I saw him near the office. Shane was waiting for someone. Maybe he wanted to talk to his father. If Christopher finds out that he is his son and that I have abandoned our son, he will leave me. I'm afraid of it. I won't survive if I lose everything and if all my plans are ruined by the appearance of Shane. I really aspired to this position. I'll work for Christopher for a while, and then I can transfer to another company for a new position. What love! I was in love with him when I was young. Now, it's just an arranged marriage. I would not agree to a relationship with him again if it were not for an attractive position and the opportunity to transfer the necessary papers to competitors. What son was she talking about? It can't be. Christopher hastily approached Kate and grabbed her hand. He jerked her around to face him. The phone fell out of the woman's hand. Where is my son? Tell me. The woman began to make excuses. Christopher, you misunderstood me. I told the mother the story of my girlfriend. Where is my son? Don't fool me anymore. When I find out the whole truth myself, I will crush you. The woman began to stutter. This. Christopher growled, ready to raise his hand to Kate if need be. Who? She answered and lowered her head. Shane. Christopher seemed to have been electrocuted. His body began to tremble with pulsations. Shane is his son? That guy with the tough childhood is his son? Tears welled up in his eyes. Tell me that you were forced to send your child to an orphanage for the disabled, and that you didn't do it for a career. Kate screamed and yanked her hand away. I gave him away because I didn't need a burden. And I will also leave you because I'm tired of you. I'm tired of shaking in front of you and being afraid to take an extra step. Christopher laughed hysterically. Run away from me. Do you think that competitors will accept you because you handed over our project to them? But my lawyer is already handling the lawsuit, and your favorite competitors will pay me such a penalty that they will have nothing to pay the wages of their employees. And after your dismissal, you will not be hired for any good position with my recommendation. I want not a single thing of yours left in my apartment in an hour. Then, Christopher hurried out of the apartment. The woman threw threats and accusations at his back and insulted him. But he didn't listen to her. He was guilty before his son, before the guy whom his heart accepted almost immediately. When Christopher got to the apartment where Shane lived, he didn't dare to go in for a long time. How can he talk to his adult son, before whom he is so guilty? How to ask him for forgiveness for his spoiled childhood? How to apologize for the fact that he accused him of stealing? The man gathered his strength, went up to the third floor, and knocked on the door. The guy opened the door after a couple of minutes. He was surprised. Mr. Roberts, what are you doing here? I know everything, but only I don't understand if I can now ask your forgiveness. I'm so guilty in front of you. Son, forgive me for everything if you can. I didn't know. Tears streamed down Christopher's cheeks. Father, I hold no grudge against you. Everything is fine. Christopher and Shane embraced. Now, they had each other and could deal with all the troubles together.
All right, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick? Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my second year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked, we could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children, with zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job, having joined the company wanting to do customer service. I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime, he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance. As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them. It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick! What's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I obediently followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was, as the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. "Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize." Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. "What kind of training are you giving your subordinates?" Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed, I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry." Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, "I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong." "Mike, what have you done?" Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You're still saying that? Look at him." Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. "I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract?" Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. "Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go." Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. "Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him." There's no way he was pushed aside. "Don't make things worse here." "He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he?" I don't remember that part." I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.